Global Motorsports Director. And we are ready for qualifying, the 25-minute session that will set the grid for the first of 3 races that these cars will run here this weekend. Tom, welcome to WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca.
Well, thank you, and you've certainly turned on the weather. This is a fantastic weekend. Only a couple of weeks ago, we were at Circuit of the Americas in Texas. It was really, really hot there, but nothing compares to the competition in the Blue Marble Radical Cup. It's fierce, and I tell you what, the championship is alive. Would you believe, after 5 events and 15 races, 2 young guns, Danny Dashelski, Nick Persing, equal on points, 703 apiece, after fighting it out. It all started in NOLA, New Orleans, a wonderful city, some great food and some great action. 3 wins for Danny Dashelski, and then he went on to claim 1 win at Barber, 1 win in Road America. We went to the streets of Toronto for the first time, a first for the Blue Marble Radical Cup, and he took a win there as well, and then 2 wins in COTA. Meanwhile, Nick Persing has 2 at Barber. He took another pair of wins at Road America and 1 each at Toronto and COTA. So Dashelski, for the moment, if the points remain tied, he would take the championship because he's got more wins to his name. But this one is going to be wild. There is 1 point on the line for qualifying. There's 3 classes in this championship, and those 2 guys are fighting not only for the Pro 1500 Championship, but also for the outright title this weekend.
I looked at it this morning, and in the final practice that they had before this qualifying session, they were 4th and 5th, so they're still neck and neck going into this qualifying session. John Field was dominant in all the practices earlier today, and he was just untouchable.
Indeed, and John Field, of course, has a lot of history around these wonderful twists and turns on the top of Laguna Seca. John Field, of course, a former America Le Mans Series champion, stepped away from motorsport for a while, regained his love for the sport at Atlanta Motorsport Park, at the Primal Racing School, driving some Radical SR1s, came back with a vengeance into this championship, and he leads the Platinum class in terms of points. He's had a number of wins. He's been really unstoppable this season. And John Field, we're expecting really, and I've got to do this math right, but I think if he takes the green in tomorrow's race, he may indeed be our 2023 Platinum class champion.
Well, the Platinum class seems to be the quicker car. It has been in the practice session, but the 1500 cars have just gotten up and destroyed all the Platinum times that we've seen behind them. They have really worked their way up into that group.
Yeah, well, we'll explain these 3 classes, if you like, just to help out the race fans here and around the world watching on the Radical Motorsport live stream. So the Platinum class cars, as we're talking about, you'll see here on the screen, there's some Dayglow yellow that indicates the Platinum class as Louis Schreiber goes through on cue. Some big nostrils in the front of those cars. Another one there, Wayne Williams coming through the corkscrew. And those nostrils are feeding a 425 brake horsepower, 380 foot-pound EcoBoost 4-cylinder engine, producing some very high top speeds, approaching 170 mile an hour at Road America into Canada Corner. And some of the fastest cars here on circuit this weekend. But as you mentioned, some of these young guns in the Pro 1500 class, which is designated by the Dayglow red on the rear wings, powered by a motorcycle-derived 4-cylinder engine with aptly 1500 cc's of capacity. Those cars very, very quick in the hands of those that can drive them well. And as you mentioned, it's no doubt the front of that field will be in the mix of the Platinum class cars. The final step on the rung, if you like, for the Blue Marble Radical Cup is the 1340cc SR3s. SR3 is the chassis, the model of Radical. In fact, it's one of the most popular race cars around the world. And thousands, in fact, in North America, would you believe, particularly at the country club racetracks like Apex Motor Club, like Spring Mountain, Chicago's Autobahn, Atlanta Motorsport Park, as we mentioned before, and others. And that class uses a 1340cc engine, also motorbike derived, but all of these engines built in-house in Peterborough at the Radical factory, as are these cars, all flown across the pond and arrive here to go racing in North America.
Yeah, you'd mentioned off mic that there are 13 worldwide Radical Cup series.
Indeed, so we're one of the only manufacturers outside of the big three, if you like, Porsche, Ferrari and Lamborghini, to have racing series around the world. And the competition is absolutely fierce, as is exemplified really by Nick Persing and Danny Dashelski this weekend. But some great racing. In fact, we're completing the year in about a month's time at Portimao alongside the European Le Mans Series for our World Finals. That'll be the second one that we have entertained after the inaugural World Finals at Spring Mountain Motor Club here in the USA last year. And we're looking forward to having races from around the world, from Australia, from the Middle East, from all across Europe, from England, and of course from the Blue Marble Radical Cup Series, as well as our counterparts in Canada racing, vying for 3 world titles.
Well, we're certainly happy that you're here at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. This is the first time I've ever seen these cars. Is it their first visit to the West Coast? And is this also the wrap-up season ender for I'm trying to come up with the North American Cup Series.
It is indeed. This is the final round, 6 of 6. And we're so pleased to be alongside IndyCar for the 4th time this year. The series has really grown from a grassroots level in North America and in particular in the US, and now supporting IndyCar for a number of events this year. So it really has taken this continent by storm. And speaking of taking things by storm, Louis Schreiber to the top of the charts with a 125 flat. So that's a relatively indicative time, pipping John Field for the moment. So Louis Schreiber in that 111 machine. He's a former Pro 1340 champion, stepped up to the Platinum class, and he should be vying for the wins as well alongside John Field. They would share the provisional front row. But the big news is Robert Soroka from Canada, another young gun, a kid who's made a mark this year. He hasn't had the testing and the time behind the wheel like Nick Persing and Danny Dashelski, who are fighting for that championship. But Soroka's fighting to make a name for himself. A young kid, as we mentioned, from Canada, was unlucky not to get that podium in the streets of Toronto. He was the fastest man in the final race at COTA and now is fastest in class. A big surprise for the Pro 1500 class. And I tell you what, he could be a cat amongst a pigeon in terms of that outright title and Pro 1500 class title fight. But Austin Riley also doing well. He's our reigning series champion, and what we mean by that is we have 3 class championships, but then we have a point score that takes into account how many people you're racing against all year long, and we have an outright champion as well. And Austin Riley, a young kid with an amazing story. Check out Racing with Autism. That young man has obviously has a few more things to deal with in life than most people. Motorsport is his sanctuary, but he has started a movement around the world. There's Racing with Autism now in Australia, in England. He was just over racing at Silverstone as his prize for winning the outright championship in the Blue Marble Radical Cup last year after an amazing fight with Mike Anzaldi. And both those guys stepping up to Pro 1500 this year. And as we look at this chart, a few things
Look like
changed.
Wayne Williams has just moved into the top 5, and he's displaced Persig and Dashelski. He's dropped them down, but the two of them are pretty evenly matched.
Wayne Williams, another superstar this year. He's a sprint car star, dirt track racer turned professional on the tarmac. And he was saying at the start of the year back in New Orleans, when it was raining, he was in his good place, his happy place, with the car moving around underneath him. he couldn't deal with the downforce and the high grip from these Hankook tyres, and he liked the car moving around. But there we are, John Field perhaps taking his rightful place at the top of the charts with a 1:23.4, so the time's tumbling now.
Yeah, the best he could do was a 1:24 in the last practice. There were 2 cars under 1:25. He was the lead car, and no one could touch him. Now he's down to 1:23. Incredible.
Well, no doubt, brand new Hankook rubber bolted onto most of the machinery throughout the grid. And speaking to Steve Cameron, who's one of the top engineers in the field and part owner of Radical Northwest, our local dealer here in California, Steve was saying that the track really evolves here with the IndyCar rubber being laid down, the way the dynamics, if you will, of that Hankook rubber interacting with the Firestone rubber, and definitely this new surface here at Laguna Seca really coming on strong every time it gets run on. More build up, more rubber, the surface evolving throughout the day here, and I think John Fields found the sweet spot. But Robert Soroka still leads. Sorry, my apologies. It's Danny Dashelski now who set the benchmark in Pro 1500, a 1:24.9. So mixing it up with the fastest in the Platinum class, and Dashelski really has been a superstar this year in Pro 1500. He seems to have had the edge on Nick Persing in terms of raw pace, but Persing's come away with some strong results, and they're tooth and nail in this championship. We'll see if Persing in the number 19 can respond. Certainly he needs to at the moment, because he's got a lot of work and a lot of cars between himself and his title rival Greg Gorski just popping up the top. And as we say that, Persing responds with a 1:24.8 for Cameron Racing Radical Northwest, the local Californian. He's got a huge contingent of family and friends here this weekend, and he's finding what it takes, what he needs to do to take this championship right down to the wire. Let's see if he can bring home the big trophy. Danny Dashelski now with a little bit of work to do. It's 1/10, a 1:24.9 versus a 1:24.8. Dashelski just having a slow tour to calm things down, try and find some space around this racetrack with 35 plus cars on this track. You can see the pictures. It's like a traffic jam around these amazing curves. Down into turn 1.
I counted earlier. I think we've got close to 30 cars on track in the group.
In fact, a few more, yeah, over 35 on track at the moment. Some dust being flicked up there at the exit of 1. And you can see guys hustling hard at the moment. Of course, the Hankook rubber tends to come on a little bit stronger as the session goes on. We're about halfway now. We've just had a spin there, and around we go. That's one of the Crown Concepts cars, so out of Arizona. And I think that might be the 333.
If he hasn't killed the motor, he should be able to come back out on track. He's on the pavement.
Yeah, indeed, and that's one of the ITM trading cars. I think it might be Eric Griffin. Apologies if it's not. The yellow flag flying, just a local.
Looks like a single-digit number on the car. Can't tell from the camera angle.
Crown Concepts out of Arizona, one of the big dealers for Radical, and bringing a huge contingent of cars as well as the local Californians. And it's great to see so many West Coast competitors.
We just saw a pass on the corkscrew coming down the hill on the inside. That's not something that usually happens. Pretty rare to be able to get inside someone there and pull off the move.
Well, with so many cars on track, it's crucial to find track position, particularly as you come down through turn 9 and 10 and then into that final corner. Of course, it's so crucial not to overcook the final braking zone. You've got to get maximum speed out onto this long front straightaway here at Laguna Seca. Try and take all that speed down into turn 1. A very big carousel, very tricky corner as well. We've seen some clashes in the Blue Marble Radical Cup in turn 1 over the years. And then we start a sequence of 90-degree right-handers. before we start climbing the hill again. And on screen there, another championship rival. That was number 5 of Ken Savage. Ken Savage in the lead of the Pro 1340 Championship. We'll see where he is on the timing charts. He is third fastest at the moment behind Jace Bacon and Chris McMurray. McMurray, another former American Le Mans star. So we've got some big names in this field, some young guns coming up as well.
35 cars have recorded times as we move into the final 10 minutes of this 25-minute qualifying session.
Well, it's big news for Cameron Racing, Radical Northwest, with Nick Persing. That would be 1 point, and that would put him clear in the lead by just 1 point over Danny Jashelski. But Robert Soroka, he's going to be racing this weekend. You can feel it for the number 94. Greg Gorski, he's leading our Fangio Championship within the Pro 1500 class, and he just got pipped by Austin Riley, who's fourth fastest in that class now. Aurora Strauss, she's showing speed all throughout the weekend. The young driver backed by Richard Millet, and she's one of our Radical ambassadors around the world. And Aurora Strauss flying the flag for Radical. She's done well in everything that she's driven, whether it's with a roof or open cockpit. And Ron Fletcher also coming up through the charts, one of our locals from California. Bit of a shout out too for Miguel Grillo and Joe Nuxel, Jeff Ramsey, Richard McDougall, Todd Curtis joining as well. So a number of fresh faces in this championship, and one maybe to watch back in Pro 1340 is to see if Ben Blander from Chicago in the number 34 can do anything. He just did his personal best last time round with a 1:29.3, but that's not in the 27s, which is what Jace Bacon, Chris McMurray, and indeed Ken Savage are doing. That's the top 3 in Pro 1340.
Persing has just improved his lap time. He's now 0.3 of a second quicker than Danny Jashelski.
Wow, so Jashelski for the first time this season isn't on top of the charts and isn't looking comfortable. We'll see what he has with 8.5 minutes to go, though. There's one thing I know about Danny Jashelski and that 88 Wisco racing machine. It is super quick. He's a cool, calm kid, a man of very few words, although as this championship's evolved, you can start to see the personality just crack through this very cool, calm demeanor. And Louis Schreiber now in the 124 as well, 124.8. So he's just put himself in between the Pro 1500s, and that's something that these guys with this multi-class racing have have to be really mindful as we take the green flag tomorrow, is that the Platinum class cars will typically get the jump. They'll probably lead into turn 1, leave these Pro 1500 guys to race for a couple of laps, but then no doubt the Pro 1500s will be vying for the outright win as well, and that's where there's going to have to be a little bit of etiquette with these top drivers, not to get mixed up in each other's races, because John Field will be trying to get that win over Louis Schreiber. Of course, vice versa. Schreiber's going to be trying for that win. You can believe that.
Yeah, and the Platinum cars have the horsepower advantage. What about a weight differential between the cars?
Platinum class is a little bit heavier, so it just corners ever so slower. So you'll see the Pro 1500s, particularly around these high-speed 90-degree right-handers and left-handers at Laguna Seca, where the Pro 1500s, and for that matter, even the Pro 1340s, can carry a lot of road speed. Very, very confidence-inspiring, these cars. And then, of course, the turbocharged EcoBoost Ford-derived engines in the back of those SR10 Platinum class cars will start to motor on down this front straightaway, and also up the backside of the circuit right up to the corkscrew.
Yeah, you were talking about turn 11. The key to a fast lap here at WeatherTech Raceway is to get a good exit speed out of turn 11, because it puts you on the longest straightaway here.
And speaking of which, we've just had a spin. There is a car, didn't quite make contact with the inside wall there along pit straight, and it's just looping back around. My eyes don't deceive. That might have been Greg Gorski. It's certainly a black car with a bit of red.
Quite a bit of runoff room down there in that corner. Went off driver's right.
These guys are starting to hustle again. Just over 5 minutes remaining. Persing going through the shot there. And that multicolored class was Mike Anzardi, who had that great battle with Austin Riley last year. Will Lynn going through screen as well.
Most of these drivers, I don't think, have seen this track before.
Well, a lot haven't, but a lot have. So the series has been here, and we've got quite a bit of commotion. There's some dust, and now another car spun. And that's a car with a shark fin. I just wonder if that is Arul Venkatesh, perhaps, in the 13. It looks like the rear wing of that car has been folded over. And so possibly contact earlier on in the lap with someone else. It's amazing how, even though the rear wing is slightly narrower than the bodywork, it seems to be easy to clip a rear wing with
Fortunate that he got underway. That would have been a red flag situation. He was in an impact zone.
Well, right, and that's crucial for the guys that are vying for this these points. 1 point apiece for whoever can come out on top in each of the three classes. And that car, yeah, with that wing frame, you see will be touring slowly, because without that rear wing, very little downforce on the rear. Certainly not enough to maintain speed around all of these sweepers. And that's game, set, match. That will have to be into the box in pit lane. His qualifying session.
Schreiber has split Pershing and Jaselski.
Indeed, and so Persing still doing the business with 4 minutes remaining in this session. The leaders at the moment in each of these three classes, John Field, who's the fastest outright. He also leads the Platinum class and is the provisional pole sitter. A 1:23.4 is the fastest time of the field and of the Platinum class from Louis Schreiber and Wayne Williams as top three. Another spin into turn one, and that's in the gravel. Of course, the disaster zone really is the gravel traps of WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. It's very rare that you get out of them, but we've got one out, and thanks to that new little bit of concrete on the exit of turn one has saved the day there. We continue to remain green for this session. So we'll just take a look at what happened here into turn one. Here we go. So as we come in, quite an early lockup, and perhaps the brake bias slightly wrong. Certainly the rear of the car getting unsettled quite early on in that braking zone, and even really just before he turned in. So the rear just snapping around under brakes. The Pro 1340 class is now Ken Savage. It's gone to the top of the charts, would you believe? A 1:27.155. He matches Chris McMurray's time of a 1:27.155. Now, I think if I'm right, and I'll have to check the rule book on this, but McMurray, we'll have to see, he did set that lap certainly earlier.
Usually goes to whoever sets it first.
Whoever sets it first would get the pole. So Ken Savage is on top of the chart. Not sure if that's just because his car number is lower than Chris McMurray's, but unbelievable to come down to hundreds of a second and these drivers matching each other for the qualifying in Pro 1340. Unbelievable. Ken Savage will be happy with that, though. That's one more point closer for him on his way to hopefully winning the Pro 1340 championship. Of course, the man sitting third fastest, young Jace Bacon, will be hoping to eclipse him, or certainly in the races to come, because Jace Bacon needs to make up some points if he can take the championship. And he's certainly a superstar in the making. Very little racing to his name, less than a year behind the wheel. Jace Bacon vying for a championship in his first season of Blue Marble Radical Cup, first season of proper motorsport. So definitely keep that name jotted down.
Coming down to the final minute of this qualifying session, which again will set the grid for the first of three races here this weekend for the Radical Cup North America cars.
That's right, and the fastest laps in race 1 will set the grid for race 2. The fastest laps in race 2 will set the grid for race 3. Means that even if you don't have the best qualifying session, you can still work your way up through the field and regain your rightful spot, if you will, throughout the weekend. That final race on Sunday morning will feature a mandatory pit stop. And a moment there on the exit of turn 1, you can see the red car just get out wide, get into the marbles and into some of the grey bits, the dust and dirt around the outside of the circuit, and then off. That was the number 3, I think, of Seth Bacon, Crown Concepts. So here we go. Aurora Strauss just passed the post, but she's still sitting with a 1:25.7. It's impressive though, 4th fastest for her in Pro 1500. And after missing the Coda round, she's come back with a vengeance. The checker flag is out. Drivers nearly side by side. Nearly a bit of a hip and shoulder there.
These times do count as they cross the start-finish line on this final lap.
They do indeed, and
I've seen things change radically on that final time.
You can think you're home and hosed, and you can be sitting in that pit lane smiling and congratulating each other, and all of a sudden your arch rival passes that final checker flag and pips you for the pole position. But we'll see what happens here. John Field still on provisional pole of platinum class from Louis Schreiber, Wayne Williams. It's Nick Persing, the hometown hero. We've got a car in the wall, it looks like, leading up to
between
the pit entry.
10 and 11. Exit at 10.
Exit at 10. He's probably dropped a wheel on the outside. Too much lock over the rumble strips, and that's tossed the car onto the outside wall.
He's way off the course. He's off driver's right.
Yeah, it looks like just a local yellow. So don't think anyone's going to improve on that final tour because of that. Cars coming into pit lane, they'll get flushed out at turn 10 as well, and then down into Parc Ferme. We'll celebrate the Motul Pole Awards, and provisionally they go to John Field, who's fastest outright and takes the provisional pole in the platinum class from Louis Schreiber and Wayne Williams. It was Nick Persing who will take the Motul Pole Award in the Pro 1500s from Danny Dashelski, who was 4th fastest, and then it's Robert Soroka rounding out the top 5. He was the 3rd fastest in Pro 1500, and impressive for Aurora Strauss, 4th in that class. Then we have to go back to Pro 1340, and it is Chris McMurray, although we mentioned that it might indeed be Ken Savage. So Ken Savage, I believe, who set that time slightly, or actually it's changed. It has changed. So Chris McMurray went even faster still and did a 1:26.7 in those closing stages. So he'll take the pole from Ken Savage and Jace Bacon in Pro 1340. There's a lot of names on those results. You can see how tight the times are all throughout the field. There's going to be great action unfolding from the 3 classes in the Blue Marble Radical Cup. And we look forward to bringing you 2 races here at WeatherTech Raceway tomorrow, and then 1 final race on Sunday morning before the grand finale of the IndyCar season.
Now, you said that race Sunday morning has a pit stop.
Indeed it does. So there's a delta that the drivers have to hit between the pit in and pit out timing loops. It's 60 seconds, and it sort of means a stationary time of about 19.3 seconds. The delta is 19.3, so they've got to do a bit of math, as I'm not doing up here in the commentary booth at the moment. But 60 minus 19.3, and that will give you a stationary time. But it's always
32.7.
Catches
42.7.
Catches a few drivers out. It prepares a few drivers as well. And Nick Persing saying that when he jumped into the Lamborghini Super Trofeo series, it was his pit stop practice here in the Blue Marble Radical Cup that made it so easy for him to step up into that series.
Well, that was an exciting qualifying session, Tom, and thank you for joining us, and we look forward to working with you again during the 3 races that are scheduled this weekend for the Radical Cup Series.
Well, we're just happy to be here and enjoying this stunning racetrack, all the race fans that are around here. This is a huge festival weekend. It's awesome to see so many people piling in the motorhomes, and hopefully we can put a good show on for all the race fans out there. Come on down to the paddock area and check out these wonderful machines. Speak to the drivers. We've also got an autograph session tomorrow at 1:30 down in the fan zone area.
All right. If the qualifying is any indication, we're going to have 3 fantastic races for these cars this weekend.
It's going to be a wild finish to this season. We'll see who comes out on top. Will it be Danny Dashelski or the pole sitter in Pro 1500, Nick Persing?
Thank you very much, Tom Brewer. This is the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey.